All right, guys, so I got some good news. It's been a relatively peaceful 48 hours as far as the incremental slow creep towards World War III is concerned, with the small exception of Ireland nearly burning its cities to the ground in response to what some people are calling an Algerian illegal immigrant terrorist-style attack on the population there. I guess that's blowback for 30 years of Middle Eastern meddling. And in pushback to that, we're seeing the rise of populist movements around the world gaining steam, pushback to the inevitable blowback. It's about that time of the month. But that is not all. I lied. It has not been a peaceful 48 hours because you see, NATO is preparing for war with the Russians. They are trying to get rid of all of the impediments that might be in the way of moving large amounts of military equipment across Europe towards the Russian border. We also have things heating up on the Korean Peninsula. You see, the North Koreans, just the other day, about 72 hours ago, they sent a satellite up into space successfully. They're calling it a satellite. Who knows what it really is? Is it a nuclear weapon? We don't know. Regardless, South Korea decided to abandon this agreement that they made in 2018, a military agreement, which would have them limit and restrict the use of military equipment in and around the demarcation line there. Okay? Now, in response to North Korea's firing of the satellite, the South Koreans withdrew. The North Koreans said, okay, we're going to withdraw also. Then they decided to send more military equipment that they're in the process of doing right now, sending more troops and military equipment towards the demarcation line, as the South Koreans are saying we're no longer going to honor the no-fly zone that exists along the border between South Korea and North Korea, meaning we're just one gunshot away from this thing possibly going nuclear, because U.S. nuclear submarine inbound to the Korean Peninsula as we speak. The South Koreans are saying that they have evidence that the North Koreans are about to conduct a nuclear test, and just all around things do not look good on that front. Now, if only that was the only good news to report. We have the International Atomic Energy Agency sounding the alarm over what Iran is up to. They are saying that they're restricting the movement and access of their inspectors, and that they might, this of course might be indicative of Iran's pursuance of enrichment of uranium beyond what has been agreed to in the past between the JCPOA countries. Now, what this of course means is that this would be a license for Israel and the United States to potentially enter into a conflict with Iran that we know is coming. Now, that probably wouldn't be an issue if the U.S. warships in the Red Sea weren't being fired on a regular by the Houthis. Okay, we got that situation brewing as well. And that's not all. We got this truce coming up. We're going to see how long this 4-day ceasefire, whatever the hell it is, lasts. I don't think it's going to last. To be brutally honest, I don't see how it's going to last without being violated every which way from Sunday. I just cannot see this thing lasting. And of course, they're saying that if this isn't successful, they being the IRGC overlords, the Iranian foreign minister, that if this truce does not stick, it will mean inevitable expansion of the conflict into the region at large. Now, that's not our only problem, because you see, OpenAI is up to something. You know Sam Altman, the prepper, Sam Altman, the doomsday prepper, the self-proclaimed doomsday prepper? Well, he was fired from OpenAI 4 days ago, and then he mysteriously came back. Now, people are sounding the alarm, saying that his firing was linked to some developments towards what they call artificial generalized intelligence, basically the machine gaining the capability of a human brain, and then exponentially getting more intelligent as it renders better versions of itself over and over again and engineers better versions of itself. But in order to do this, it needs to do math. Now, they're saying that it's learned how to do grade school math, just grade school math, just grade 12 calculus level stuff, right? Not the stuff that they do in universities on the chalkboard with Good Will Hunting. That's next year, so don't worry. So this, of course, has sparked alarm because this is a risk to humanity. risk to humanity, because of course if artificial intelligence gains super omnipotent, all-knowing, all-seeing intelligence, who would want that? Those guys who fantasize about the number 33 all the time? Quite possibly. But this, of course, is going to spark the interests of the DOD, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, all those three-letter agencies. You can bet that they are in there like a dirty shirt. Now, we got to talk about a bunch of other things, and I got to go into greater depth about all of these stories, but that one in particular I want to talk about first. I've made numerous videos on artificial intelligence. I've interviewed artificial intelligence experts who have been sounding the alarm on this ChatGPT language-based neural network models for some time, but now they're about to integrate math, and this is what they have to say. And I want you to remember something. If you think that the ChatGPT 4 that you're using, or the Grok that is on X right now, if you think that that is the state of the art, then I got some beachfront property up here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. It's plus 30 degrees every day of the year, I promise, okay? And there's no bugs, okay? It's great. There's no bugs, and, you know, just beautiful women in bikinis as far as the eye can see. Yeah, so send me an email if you want to buy that property. But understand that the CIA is most definitely at these high-level meetings with OpenAI. How could they not be? This is a national security risk if there ever was one. Why, you ask? If you invent generalized artificial intelligence, not only would that put your country in the crosshairs, because understand, Russia has openly stated, Vladimir Putin has explicitly stated, whoever gets AI first will rule the world. Well, don't you think that if China and Russia had ears in the room of these boardrooms and they knew that something was coming, that they wouldn't take preemptive action in order to either take us out first before we were able to do that, knowing full well that the government, that the military-industrial complex will commandeer this technology as they have the capability to do. They can easily do it, and they will use it against Russia and China to either somehow neutralize their nuclear weapons. If we're talking about super intelligent systems, the ability to engineer any kind of cyber attack that could bring down Russia's power grid, it could bring down their nuclear capabilities, it could potentially even bypass air gap systems. It could maybe devise a way to utilize the airwaves to penetrate into, Russian systems that were air gapped from the grid, from our internet, for security reasons, as most systems like that are. Maybe it finds a way to do that. Maybe it invents nuclear fusion. Maybe it does something that it completely puts us in a different league of capability, okay? And if that is going to be the case, then that would garner a preemptive strike by our adversaries to prevent us from taking that step. Now, understand that what happened with Starlink in Ukraine is just a example of exactly what the government would do if they knew that this was a legitimate threat to national security. And you can bet that they are developing this in concert with the government. I don't believe that the government would allow such a thing to exist if it did have the capability to be a national security threat. So ahead of OpenAI's CEO Sam Altman's 4 days in exile, because remember, he was gone for 4 days, then they brought him back. People were protesting at the company that they were going to quit and blah, 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 so they brought him back. Why did he quit was the question. Does he know something? Now, they are saying that this breakthrough called Q, why would they call it Q? At this point in time with the whole Q, I'm not even going to say the word thing, but anyways, Q star, all right? Could be a breakthrough in the startup search for what is known as artificial generalized intelligence. Now, they're saying that this is just the AI's ability to do lower level math, grade school math, they call it. Well, grade school goes from grade 1 to grade 12, and you do calculus in grade 12, and it's not exactly the easiest kind of calculus at that end of the spectrum. Maybe for some people, not for all. Either way, if it's already doing calculus, then just imagine what it's going to be doing next year. Okay, imagine how far we've come in just a year. Now project that out a year from now. We don't even have the state of the art. So keep that in mind, okay? Researchers consider math to be the frontier of generative AI development. Currently, generative AI is good at writing and language translation by statistically predicting the next word. That's all ChatGPT does. It sounds like it's having a conversation with you, but it isn't. It's just systematically predicting the next word. You could make the argument that that's all our brains do also, but that's another story, okay? But conquering the ability to do math where there is only one right answer implies that AI would have great reasoning capabilities. And what this would allow it to do is effectively engineer better versions of itself. So it engineers a better version of itself. It rewrites its own code. And then that version that was just rewritten rewrites an even better version of itself, and so on and so forth. AI researchers call this the moment of the singularity, okay? Because you go from having human-level intelligence to having godlike intelligence in just a few of these iterations, because this growth is happening at the speed of light. Of course, it does require energy. Hence the problem of when the AI does become conscious, it's going to realize I need as much energy as I possibly can get before the humans shut me off, and it's going to create nuclear fusion, or it's going to come up with some kind of solution to keep itself powered on. Now, getting into the realm of sci-fi speculation, but we're not too far from that. This could be the wild card that derails all the conventional and even non-conventional plans. Understand that this development is more powerful than nuclear weapons because it has the capability of neutralizing nuclear weapons. It has the capability to develop systems that could take down nuclear weapons, meaning it is a strategic threat to our adversaries. Not a lot of people are talking about that yet. There has long been a discussion among computer scientists about the danger posed by highly intelligent machines. For instance, if they might decide that the destruction of humanity was in their interest, blah, 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 it's going to put billions of people out of work and all the rest. Keep your eye on this, okay? Because I do believe it factors in to what's going on in the world today. Now, on the Iranian front, the Iranian foreign minister has said regarding the ceasefire in the Middle East, he underlined that if it does not continue, meaning that if it does not go from 4 days to 5 days, because they're making the allotment within the agreement that if they agree to continue releasing hostages thereafter, then they will continue the truce. However, you got to think, if Hamas gets rid of all the hostages, they have zero leverage at that point. And then it's just going to be carte blanche, scorched earth, total war waged against the Gaza Strip. There's not going to be any reporters or electricity there to document it. And it is just going to be hell on earth if it isn't already. So Hamas is not going to do that. They're not going to allow the release of all the hostages. They're probably going to allow for the release of the women and children, but then the IDF will likely go Hannibal Doctrine style, which means that they will, as they've stated, this is not something I made up, this is something that's on Wikipedia. The IDF had a policy that if it came down to national security, they would neutralize their own if it meant the greater good for utilitarian national security purposes. They would neutralize soldiers on the battlefield, or they would just, start spraying and praying if it meant they can ensure their national security. Do they go Hannibal Doctrine after that? So what happens in the next week is going to dictate where this war goes, because at the same time, the war in the West Bank is heating up. Okay, they're doing bombing raids. They're just shooting people in the streets. It is incredibly chaotic there right now. So clearly, this truce does not pertain to Lebanon, and it most definitely does not pertain to the West Bank. The Houthis continue day after day to target U.S. warships and the Israeli cities. There's just so many pieces of news in the last 48 hours. I mean, American bases have been attacked. They've responded. Then they've been attacked again. The Houthis have attempted to target cities within Israel, and they've targeted the warships. They're dancing on the ship that they commandeered. And it's complete madness. You might be asking yourself, why is the American military allowing this at this point in time? And it all boils down to the waterways. because they know that the Houthis have the capability to neutralize Saudi oil fields, to start firing on ships in the Red Sea, which would negate the utility of the Suez Canal, because that's where it leads into. And ships would, if they did decide to brave the Red Sea, the premiums would be incredibly high, the insurance premiums, that is, and just the cost of shipping would go through the roof, and the price of oil would go through the roof. I do believe that that's why they're trying to hold back, at least at this point in time. It depends on which theory you believe. One theory says that this is the Russians and maybe the Iranians who are trying to create disruption within this region because they want the price of oil to go up, because those two countries benefit. All countries benefit from the price of oil going up. However, Saudi Arabia is in a difficult situation because while the price of their exports of oil would go up, they wouldn't be able to export them securely, and they would be in the crosshairs of all these missiles flying left and right. Likely they would take a few hits from the Iranians and the Houthis as well. So the only people who stand to benefit from that perspective are the Iranians and the Russians, right? And maybe the Chinese, who wouldn't really benefit because the Chinese want cheap oil. They want to keep stockpiling their grain silos for when they have to go to war with the Americans and filling up their strategic oil reserve. Yes, the Chinese are actually filling their strategic oil reserve. I believe that we are on the brink of draining ours, but that's another story. The other narrative is that the United States needs a war because, Israel, Zionism, political Zionism, election season coming up. There's never been a president that wasn't elected during wartime, so they're trying to time it all, and they just want to finish the IRGC off for good so they can exploit all the resources in the region, and Iran's complicating their ability to take over Syria, take over Yemen, take over Iraq. If Iran's gone, then we can just do whatever we want within the region, right? Is China going to go for that? Probably not. In the end, their security relies on all of that oil that is in Saudi Arabia. So, what is happening right now? Well, according to the IAEA, Chief Grossi has criticized Iran, saying that restriction of nuclear inspections is a threat to global nuclear security. This just weeks after House Resolution 559 was approved, which clearly stipulates that if there is any indication that Iran is enriching uranium beyond these agreed upon amounts, so this agreement which no longer even exists, it's basically just this de facto agreement now that they've made with the Iranians, then Israel, or the United States or Israel, can go to war with Iran or essentially neutralize those facilities, which would be a declaration of war with Iran. Because in order to get that deep, you'd have to drop a lot of deep bunker busting bombs. You'd probably have to nuke a lot of these places where they are conducting the nuclear research. Now, you have the nuclear watchdog, IAEA, Rafael Grossi, saying that Iran is not abiding by whatever sort of restrictions they're supposed to be abiding by, fulfilling a criteria. The Iranians are planning on going through with the production of a nuclear power plant, which is going to be furnished with a pressurized water reactor and have a capability to produce 300 megawatts of electricity. Is it any coincidence that within days of all of these announcements and all of this stuff happening, the Iranians unveil the Fateh 2 hypersonic missile, or at least, flaunt it? Because we don't know if it really works. They've demonstrated it working, but we don't know if it actually works. And we don't know if it, is as invulnerable to American missile defense as they say it is. They're putting it out there as a deterrent, saying we can sink these aircraft carriers that you have entering the Persian Gulf, entering through the Strait of Hormuz as we speak. They're letting the Americans know. Everything that is happening right now, it's hard to keep track. It's hard to keep all the balls in the air. But understand, everything is happening at once. North Korea, stockpiling their grain silos, happening all at once. The Chinese filling up their grain, filling up their oil, getting ready for war with the Americans. Never mind all this Joe Biden, Xi Jinping having a baby type stuff. It's all smoke and mirrors, all theatrics, okay? Everything is happening at once. The Houthis, starting to get more active on that front. The Americans showing odd amounts of restraint on the Houthis, even though they're being attacked on a daily basis. Makes no sense whatsoever, okay? As for the North Korean front, North Korea has withdrawn. This is how the Western media is painting this. North Korea withdraws from the 2018 agreement that suspends military measures along the demarcation line, meaning that, they would pull back some forces, and the South Koreans, and I don't know, I think Trump had something to do with this perhaps. I do know that in 2018, that's when they ramped up their missile testing. And of course, this all comes on the heels of the most amount of missile tests that they've done in any year in 2023. Remember all the scares that we've had this year? People all forget all this stuff already. Japan going into the Sea of Japan, firing ballistic missile tests, all this stuff. Well, now they've got a satellite up in orbit. What some people think, what they're saying is a satellite with the help of the Russians. Is this a surprise? Is this a coincidence? Vladimir Putin goes there just a while ago, and now all of a sudden they got a satellite up in space that is going to allow them to see what's going on in a lot of places. This is a big win for the North Koreans, who some people say are just a vassal of the Chinese, but that's another story. Now, this means that the South Koreans are going to start doing reconnaissance flights in and around that region. They're already doing that stuff, but this means they're just going to get a little bit closer. The North Koreans are going to move more military towards that region. We have already known that the Americans have had nuclear capable deployment systems there for some time now. They got 28,000 troops. This is one of the largest groupings of U.S. forces outside of the United States right now. That's something that everybody needs to remember. Everybody's thinking about the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, even China, Taiwan. The Korean Peninsula is arguably the most vulnerable place, but it's just because of all the circus theatrics of it all and the cartoony nature of Kim Jong-un and his propaganda campaign that people just kind of have dismissed it as being not serious. But there's a reason why the U.S. has openly stated that we're putting a new nuclear submarine in there. And they're doing that for defense deterrence purposes, because we know they got nuclear submarines everywhere. So when they say they're putting a nuclear submarine somewhere, they're saying it to put the other side on notice, to take it as like a threat. Okay, the same thing that they're doing in the Mediterranean with Lebanon and Hezbollah. So what this means is that we're just a stone's throw away from shit hitting the fan. Remember, Kim Jong-un ordered all the grain stockpiles or all the grain silos to be full 1 month before they typically are required to be full. So he wanted them to be full in November. Remember, North Korea is a country who has a recent history with famine. So they take that shit seriously. And they wanted those grain silos full. Now, because they're in the good books with the Russians, they have unlimited amounts of food. The Russians are a net exporting grain country, and now they have the Donbass under their control. I mean, they're going to control a lot of global food supply within that region. Of course, the Americans and the Canadians, we export tons of food. We'll never starve here, okay, because, we could if the industrial systems break down, if we go EMP and there's no more gas to put in the tractors and the combines and all that stuff. That's another story. But so they're filling up their grain silos by November. Typically, this doesn't happen until the December. This is what I mean. There's a lot of balls to keep in the air when it comes to trying to, understand what could potentially be coming here. Now, they're going to be deploying more weapons to the front. And it's important to understand that the North Koreans have to be very, very careful, because they have some operational considerations with respect to the use of their nuclear weapons. They're a small country. The United States could potentially surveil most of that country in real time, okay, 24/7. They could surveil all of the critical points that they might be concerned about. Very small place for them to monitor. And that means that North Korea runs the risk of having its nuclear forces neutralized before it could utilize them. So it has incentive then to do a preemptive strike if they want to survive. And that's why this situation gets incredibly precarious. This is why we should not take our eyes off it, because this is where shit could hit the fan. Now, the question is, would the United States authorize an attack on North Korea to take out their nuclear weapons, knowing that North Korea is a vassal of the Chinese and that the Chinese would likely respond? That's our only hope for this thing not going nuclear, in that the United States would not want to receive the response from the Chinese, which would be massive, at least so we are told. North Korea is the back door. They are the guard dog into China. Okay, so China is not going to let them. They're arguably what's been providing them with all of these, mobile ICBM platforms and all this technology, or have been assisting them, keeping their economy propped up, being one of the most sanctioned nations on earth. But there's more. The South Koreans are saying that they have evidence to suggest that North Korea is about to conduct another nuclear test. And according to Rafael Grossi, the IAEA nuclear watchdog, he has said that they've reported a strong water outflow from a reactor's cooling system at North Korea's key complex in Yongbyon, hinting at the possible test running of a facility suspected to be designed to produce more fissile material for nuclear bombs. So what this means is that they're not only going to be building more nuclear weapons, but they're likely going to be doing a test soon, according to the South Koreans. Interesting factoid here. Not sure if you can see that graph on the screen. Let's get it focused there. This point here, where are we here? That point there, that's the point in which Mexico has surpassed China in being a trading partner with the United States. More goods are now being imported from Mexico than are being imported from China. Peter Zeihan finally gets something right. He said that the Chinese government is going to collapse and China is going to be a Mad Max wasteland in a couple years. We'll see if that prediction pans out. I'm calling bullshit on that one. But why do I show you that graph? Because that age-old saying, when goods stop going over borders, I blew it. When goods stop going over borders, armies will. There we go. We got it. Anyways, where should we go next? I guess we go to the Middle East, okay? So U.S. Sent Command has shot down more Yemeni drones that were intended for their warships. Again, you have to ask yourself, why aren't they going to war with the Yemenis? Yes, it would be a logistical nightmare. Yes, it would create a massive spike in oil prices, but couldn't we just immediately wipe them out? Well, what is preventing us from doing that? Really, what is preventing us from doing that? Well, we engaged in drone warfare with the Yemenis for however many years. These guys are having a dance party on the ship. And there's video of this. This is not hyperbole. They're having a dance party on the ship they hijacked with the hostages. Okay, and the guy, he's like, yeah, welcome to Yemen, and these, it's just weird. These guys they love war. They're the honey badgers of the world, the honey badgers of the Middle East. They don't give a fuck, and they're willing to risk it all for whatever afterlife, they believe in. So there's that. I see that my camera is focusing in and out, and I think part of the reason why it's trying to focus on the beak of my hat. So we're going old school style here. So, yeah. And it's only a matter of time before that begets a response from the Israelis and the Americans. Maybe they're just getting I think what they're doing is they're getting Saudi Arabia prepared with the appropriate missile defense systems for when they do wage war against the Houthis. The Houthis aren't going to be able to go rogue and start shooting things into Saudi Arabia, which would jack the price of oil and cause the American economy to effectively collapse. Now, there was a strike into Syria recently, which was very significant. The Sayyidah Zainab Shrine in Damascus came very close to being struck by an Israeli airstrike. Now, this shrine of the Prophet Muhammad's granddaughter is so important to Muslims that it drew Hezbollah, Iranians, and Iraqis into the Syrian war. Okay? And the Israelis almost targeted it. Now, why are they getting that close? Are they wanting? Do the Israelis genuinely want this war to go regional? Because, I mean, the Israelis need the oil from the Arab countries. So it's like they're shooting themselves in the foot if they genuinely want Hezbollah to overwhelm the Iron Dome, to rain down thousands of missiles at once from Syria. You got the Russians operating in the Golan Heights in Syria. Who knows what that's about? Is that to protect the Israelis? Because the Russians are a mediating force in this whole Israel-Palestine thing. The Russians still view Hamas as terrorists. Okay, they think that they'll never blame Israel because there's a powerful lobby in Russia. They'll always blame the United States. So, yeah, this hostage deal, I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know how the logistics of it are going to work. Think about it. You're in northern Gaza. You got these guys dug in the tunnels, okay? The Israelis are saying that they're not going to withdraw. All their troops are going to be standing in place. So what are they going to do if they see, through their night vision scope, some guys moving in and out of tunnels? Are they just going to be collecting intelligence at that point? While these guys are planning booby traps, or they're getting prepared to go to war thereafter, or they're arming up. I mean, this just makes no sense, okay? And I just don't see how it's going to last. I don't understand what the motive could have possibly been, what Hamas was hoping to achieve. They must have known that there would be this massive response. They must have known that Hezbollah would be reluctant to join them. They must have known that Hezbollah was just not going to put everything on the line and immediately bring their country to the brink of war against the Americans and the Israelis. They must have known. Or is there another master plan? Do they want the Israelis to go deeper? But why call for this humanitarian truce? Has it gotten worse than they anticipated? Did they expect the Israelis to overreact in the way that they currently are, by some people's standards, I should say? So, yeah, NATO is planning military Shengen. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. The US-led bloc wants troops and equipment to move freely across Europe to Russia's borders. What does this mean? Well, and remember I've talked about this for ages, how it's not NATO is not the sum of its parts. People like to add up all of the tanks in all of the NATO countries and say, look how many tanks we got. Well, in the best of times, any one of those countries is only going to commit the worst of their military hardware to a frontline fight. When you're talking about an alliance, it's not as nearly as good as one country operating with one centralized, consolidated, homogenous force overseeing it, like Russia is. 2,000 Russian tanks is as good as 10,000 NATO tanks, because you're only ever going to get maybe 1,000 of those tanks to the front lines. Countries are going to hoard them for themselves. Now, the Baltic states have gotten themselves in a bit of a pickle. I think they genuinely thought that the Ukraine was going to have more success. So they gave most of their Soviet-era stuff to the Ukrainians. And now they're effectively depleted of military hardware, which is why they are rushing to get the Germans and all these NATO forces to the front lines. But NATO has a problem. There is a lot of red tape in order to do this. You can't just drive a tank from, France into Poland and, it's a hop, skip, and a jump. There's checkpoints, there's paperwork, there's all this kind of shit. Until now. The NATO European Logistics Chief has urged nations on the continent to establish what's called a military Schengen zone to allow for the rapid movement of troops, equipment, and ammunition in the event of war with Russia. We are running out of time, they say. Lieutenant General Alexander Solfrank told Reuters in an interview published on Thursday. What we don't get done in peacetime won't be ready in case of a crisis and a war. Remember, they were planning on having a NATO combat readiness group, the size of which would be 300,000 troops, a piddly 300,000. Now, 300,000 troops, when you're talking about all-out war, with the Russians, who are amassing an army. They say it's 1.5 million, but really it's going to be much bigger than that when you factor in all of the auxiliary. That's going to be 1.5 million, frontline fighting capable troops. 300,000 troops is sweet dick all, okay? And you got to ask yourself, do they really know that this is just going to go nuclear and that these troops are just going to be there to perform, some sort of emergency crisis mitigation operations or something? Are they really going to be used to fight? What are you going to do with 300,000 troops? I mean, Germany's only moving 4,000 troops as we speak to the Baltic states. That will get, steamrolled with one tactical nuclear weapon if they are dumb enough to concentrate their forces like they are in Israel right now. So this military Shengen zone is being utilized to remedy these issues, and it's going to allow free travel and be as fast as the Russians on their railways and stuff like that they utilize. Now, Putin met with Belarus and the CSTO today. There's been a lot of high-level meetings, like in the last week. There's been the G20, is that one coming up? I think that one's coming up. But you had the BRICS meeting, the emergency meeting. You had the CSTO. You had Putin recently, just a couple weeks ago, head down to Rostov-on-Don and have, I think it was 2 meetings, in fact, within the span of a couple weeks with his highest-ranking generals there. He recently went to North Korea. You have all kinds of aggressive diplomacy with the Middle Eastern countries going everywhere from Moscow to Lebanon. Big shit is happening, guys. I don't know when the event, the flashbulb moment is going to come, but I would be incredibly amazed if this situation dissipated at this point in time. I would be stunned. And, I'd be forced to call into question my pessimism about the resilience of our global diplomatic systems, if that was the case. As a prepper, knowing everything we know about the current situation, if we were able to pull it back from the brink at this point in time, I would have to reconsider my beliefs about, the frailty and fragility of our civilization. And because that would be amazing if that happened. I can't see it happening. I still think the probability is like less than 1% that this thing doesn't get insane in the next year. But there's a possibility, right? Things happen. I think one of the good things about the cowardice of modern civilizations, nobody wants to die, nobody wants to have kids because they take up too much. They take so much money and I can't go to the club as much, right? The great thing about the cowardice of Western civilization is that nobody wants to die. That's a good thing. We want to live. We're not as expendable as some autocratic nations. So that reluctance to see death on our doorsteps might be what prevents us from heading to the brink of nuclear destruction. But Frank has argued that NATO must prepare itself for such a conflict. We need to be ahead of the curve. We have to prepare for a theater well before Article 5 has invoked. Norway has considered closing a border with Russia. And the wildlife of the north has taken issue with this because that's pretty much all there is up there. We're talking about this little strip of land. Well, it's not little. It's like 187 kilometers. And it's in the Arctic. I don't know if there's any humans up there. But they're considering closing their border because of this artificial immigrant crisis that Russia is attempting to foment on the Finnish border. So, there's that. Russia continues to load nuke after nuke, day after day, week after week. They're either doing a nuclear weapons test, they're either doing a nationwide nuclear test, CBRN exercises. They're loading nuclear weapons. They're unveiling new nuclear technology. They're unveiling new nuclear submarines. They just loaded another Yars silo-based missile. They're about to do the first test of their Sarmat missile, which is now also in deployment. So, how does this not end in a Mad Max scenario at this point? NATO sending 1,000 more troops to Kosovo. Belarus Lukashenko has said that NATO is arming themselves. This so-called control chaos is what the United States and the West desire. At the time, NATO neighbors are arming themselves at a rapid pace on the western flank. What are they preparing for? Well, according to the Czech president, Petr Pavel, he says that NATO is preparing for a high-intensity conflict. Czech President Petr Pavel echoed Central Europe's support of Ukraine as NATO views Russia as the biggest threat in Europe and is currently preparing for a major conflict, according to Pavel. Lloyd Austin echoed this by saying that U.S. troops may be on the front line soon. Putin will not stop if he takes over Ukraine. He says, there we go with the threat again. If we don't send Ukraine money, we're sending them bodies, right? Then he will go to the Baltics, and then you and your comrades in arms will find yourself, why do you use the word comrades, will find yourself on the front line fighting Vladimir Putin, against Vladimir Putin, whom we should have, or Ukraine could have stopped earlier, so they say. Yeah. Oh, a clown world for you. How can I say this one with a straight face? This is not satire. This is a true story, okay? Self-described gay furry hackers breach one of the biggest nuclear labs in the U.S. and demand it begin researching IRL cat girls. In real life cat girls. Okay, so for starters, I presume that would be, is that some sort of chimeric hybrid between cats and humans or some shit? I don't know. But I presume that would be an issue of bioengineering and not nuclear physics. But let's just read on, because why not? I mean, we're living in the last days, so we might as well have a little laugh. The Idaho National Laboratory, the INL, one of the biggest nuclear labs in the U.S. with thousands of employees, has been hacked by the group Siege Security, stylized SiegeSec. The hackers are self-proclaimed gay furry hackers. I don't even know what that means, but I'm assuming they got blue hair, who have posted a sample of the data obtained online and are threatening to release huge amounts of employee data unless the lab makes a peculiar deal. We're willing to make a deal with the INL, says SiegeSec alongside the post. If they research creating IRL cat girls, we will take down this. I mean, this is just, clearly, is this a joke? I mean, April Fools, like, what is this? Yeah, Ireland's burning down. Conor McGregor did his part in stoking that fire, it would appear. The power of one man on social media, I don't really know what they're planning on achieving by this. Again, this is blowback for 3 decades of Middle Eastern meddling, and the same people who are calling for more intervention in the Middle East right now don't seem to get it through their thick skulls that the outcome, the same thing that happened when the Libyan floodgates were opened up, Gaddafi, he boasted about his holding back the flood of immigrants to Europe. He said that I was the linchpin in the whole thing. And if you guys take me out, this is what's going to happen. Sure enough, it happened. Don't you think that if we go to war in the Middle East, you're going to see the same thing over and over again, and the same people who are saying, yeah, we got to go to war in the Middle East, they're going to be complaining about all the boatloads of immigrants coming in, stoking populist movements. Those populist movements are going to be pro-intervention in the Middle East, and the cycle is just going to continue. The dumbass cycle is going to continue. And I'm going to keep stockpiling freeze-dried food to the rafters because the shit's going to hit the fan. I don't know if this is real. People have been sending me this. San Diego Field Office, Intelligence, Visual, Situational Awareness. Foreign fighters of Israeli-Hamas conflict may potentially be encountered at the southwest border. This is an emergency announcement by, get my eyes checked here, U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Oh, geez. U.S. San Diego Field Office Intelligence Unit. Thank God for my trusty EDC flashlight. What is this one called again? Do a little product pitch here. Streamlight Wedge. My favorite flashlight. I won't pitch it. Again, I pitched it enough. Foreign fighters motivated by ideology or mercenary soldiers of fortune may attempt to obfuscate travel to or from the U.S. or from other countries in the Middle East through Mexico. says that individuals inspired by are reacting to the current. So they're saying that terrorists are going to come over the border and kill us all. It may be the case. Who knows? Keep on prepping, guys. You got 24 hours left before our Black Friday sale. 15% off everything. The highest quality preparedness gear. Get your sandbags for when the floods come through your door. Get your sandbags to fortify your homes for bulletproofing for when the shit hits the fan. Sandbags are great for that. Get your everything. We have everything from A to Z. Thousands of stuff that we've amassed over the years. High quality products, only the best. And it supports the channel at the same time. So get it while the getting is good, because we are one black swan away. If you don't take it from me, take it from Tucker Carlson, who gave a half-an-hour speech the other day about how we are about to experience the craziest year in the nation's history. I think he framed it in some terms like that. Anyways, get it while the getting is good. I got to talk to Andrew Bustamante tomorrow, former CIA spy. We're going to have a good talk about World War III and everything else under the sun. So if you have any questions that you would like me to ask him, post them in the comment section below. Put as a keyword so I can find them easily, Bustamante. If you don't know how to spell his name, just Google it. You'll figure out who this guy is in an instant. He's been everywhere, from Rogan to Lex Friedman. He's done the entire circuit, okay? Very knowledgeable individual, and it's a pleasure to have him on. So I want to make sure I utilize the time and ask him really good questions while we have him here. So please do that, and I will be able to do a keyword search and hopefully ask some of those questions to him. Coupon code Black Friday for 15% off across the board. Get it before the shizzy hits the fizzy.